They say I'm the most hated woman in history. And you know what? Maybe they're right. But here's what no one ever asks. What did it feel like? What went through my mind in those final seconds before I reached out? What did I see when I looked at that fruit hanging there, so close I could feel its weight without even touching it? No one asks. They just judge. If you think you know this story, stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't a myth wrapped in ancient poetry. It's not a parable designed to teach children about obedience. It's the truth, my truth, the story of the day I broke the world, and if you're honest with yourself, you'll see your own face reflected in mine. Subscribe now, because once you hear what really happened, you'll never read those old words the same way again. My name is Eve. This is my confession. The first thing you need to understand is that I didn't ask to exist. One moment, there was nothing. Not darkness, because darkness is something. Just non-being. An absence so complete that even the concept of absence didn't apply. And then there was breath. Lungs filling. Heart beating. Neurons firing. Consciousness flooding in like light breaking through deep water. And suddenly I was aware. Aware of my body. Aware of sensation. Aware that I was. I opened my eyes. The first face I ever saw was his, Adam. He was staring at me with an expression I couldn't name then but understand now. It wasn't just love. It was recognition so deep it bypassed thought and went straight to the bone, like he'd been walking around with a phantom limb his entire life, and had just discovered it was real. That it had always been real. That it had just been somewhere else. His hand found mine, warm, solid, right. And he spoke, his voice trembling. This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. I felt those words in ways I didn't have language for yet. Felt them as truth deeper than knowing. We were separate bodies, yes, but we were also one thing. One being split into two forms. Not half of each other, we were each whole. But we were also incomplete without the other. Does that make sense? Probably not. How could it? You've never known that kind of unity. And then I saw where we were. Eden. God. How do I even begin to describe it? Every beautiful thing you've ever experienced. Every sunset that stopped you mid-step. Every forest that felt like a cathedral. Every moment of perfect peace you've stolen from this broken world. Take all of that, multiply it by infinity, and you're still not close. Not even close. The garden wasn't just beautiful. It was alive in ways your world has forgotten how to be. The trees didn't just grow, they sang. Low, humming frequencies you felt in your chest before you heard them with your ears. The water didn't just flow, it laughed. Actual joy rippling through every stream and river, and the light. The light didn't just illuminate things, it loved them. It touched everything with this impossible tenderness. Like every leaf and stone and blade of grass was precious beyond measure. You could feel the rightness of it all, the way everything fit together. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was struggling. Nothing was afraid, because fear didn't exist yet. Let that sink in for a moment. A world without fear. No anxiety about tomorrow. No dread of losing what you love. No terror of being exposed, rejected, abandoned. No shame eating at you like acid from the inside. Just peace. Adam took my hand and walked me through it all, naming everything we passed. The animals, he'd named them all. Lion, bear, eagle. Each name capturing something essential about what the creature was, as if the sound itself contained its nature. Everything had order, purpose, beauty. Everything was exactly as it should be. And there was a presence. Always. Everywhere. God. I know you struggle with this. How could you not? In your world, God is invisible, disputed, a matter of faith and doubt, an endless theological debate. But in Eden, God was present the way oxygen is present. You didn't see him directly, but you breathed him in with every breath. He was woven into the fabric of reality itself. His presence was the ground beneath our feet, the air in our lungs, the light touching our skin. He would come to walk with us in the cool of the evening. Not as some distant monarch descending from a throne, but as, I don't know, like a father coming home after a long day, eager to spend time with children he adored. And when he spoke, every cell in my body leaned toward the sound. Not from fear hadn't been invented yet, but from a hunger I didn't know I had until his words satisfied it. His voice was warmth, safety, truth, made audible. That's the world I lived in. Perfect, whole, complete, until I destroyed it. But I'm getting ahead of myself, Adam. Explained the rule to me early on. Just one rule. In all that boundless freedom, all those infinite possibilities, all those countless trees heavy with fruit we could eat whenever we wanted, there was a single boundary. We can eat from any tree, he said, his face serious in a way I'd never seen before. Any tree at all, except... He gestured toward the center of the garden where 2 trees stood apart from the rest. Taller, more radiant, different. That one on the left is the tree of life, he continued. God said if we eat from it, we'll live forever. I remember frowning. Live forever? As opposed to what? The concept of not living, of ending, of death. None of it made sense. It was like trying to imagine a color that doesn't exist. And that one, Adam said, pointing to the other tree, that's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We must not eat from it. Why not? His voice dropped. Because God said the day we eat from it, we will surely die. I stared at the tree. It was beautiful. They all were. But this one had something, I don't know, a pull, like it was inviting me to look a little longer, to wonder, what does it mean to die? I asked. I don't know, Adam admitted. But God said it. That's enough. And it was enough. For a while, I didn't think much about the tree after that. Why would I? We had everything. Literally everything. Hunger didn't exist, not real hunger. We ate because food was delicious, not because we needed it to survive. Thirst was satisfied before it even registered. Tiredness, sickness, pain, all foreign concepts. We had perfect love, perfect peace, perfect communion with God. What more could we possibly want? I didn't know it then. But that question, what more could we want, was exactly the crack the serpent would slip through. I don't know how much time passed. Time didn't press in Eden the way it crushes you now. There were no deadlines looming, no sense of moments slipping away, no aging, no decay, no countdown, just an eternal present, perfect and unchanging, until the day it changed. I was alone. Adam had gone to another part of the garden, working, though work wasn't the burden it is for you. It was play. Joy. Creative partnership with God in caring for this paradise we'd been given. I was walking, just walking, feeling the warmth of the sun on my shoulders, the softness of the grass under my bare feet, breathing in the scent of flowers I still don't have names for, and I found myself near the center, near those 2 trees. I wasn't seeking them out. At least, I don't think I was, but there I was, standing closer than I'd stood before, looking at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, really looking at it, and that's when I heard her voice. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? I turned around. The serpent. She was beautiful. You need to understand that. This wasn't the cursed crawling reptile of your world. This was a creature of elegance, intelligence, eyes that seemed to see past surfaces into depths, a presence that commanded attention without demanding it, and her voice, smooth, reasonable, almost concerned, like a friend gently questioning something. That didn't quite make sense. But something about her question felt wrong, off, like a note played slightly flat. No, I said, feeling a strange need to correct her, to defend God, even though he didn't need my defense. We may eat from the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God did say, "You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." The words left my mouth before I could think about them, and then I froze. Wait. Touch it? God never said anything about touching it. The prohibition was about eating. Just eating. Why did I add that extra layer? Was I trying to be extra cautious? Building a bigger fence around the rule to make sure I didn't get too close? Or was I already uncomfortable with the boundary God had set? I'll never know. But in that moment, something shifted in the serpent's expression. Subtle. You might have missed it if you weren't paying attention. But I saw it. Satisfaction. Like I'd just confirmed something she suspected. "You will not certainly die," she said. Her voice was so gentle, so compassionate, like she was letting me in on a secret that had been kept from me. Not maliciously, but like a parent keeping truth from a child, for their own good, when really the child deserves to know. My heart started beating faster. Why? I didn't understand fear yet, but something in me recognized that a threshold was being approached, that what came next would matter in ways I couldn't foresee. "God knows," she continued, each word dropping like a stone into still water, ripples spreading outward, "that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." And there it was. The seed. 3 words that embedded themselves in my consciousness like roots burrowing into soil. You, like God, knowing. Why? My voice came out as a whisper. Why would God keep knowledge from us? The serpent tilted her head, her eyes never leaving mine. Ask yourself. So I did. Standing there with the fruit hanging just within reach, I started asking questions I'd never thought to ask before. Why was the tree there if we couldn't eat from it? Why create beings with the capacity to know but then forbid them from knowing? If God loved us, wouldn't he want us to have every good thing? What was he protecting us from? Or, and this thought came like a whisper from somewhere dark, what was he protecting for himself? Each question spawned another. Each doubt fertilized the next. And with every passing second, the boundary God had set looked less like protection and more like control. The tree stopped being a forbidden thing and started being a door. A door to more, to better, to something I was being denied for no good reason. I looked at the fruit, really looked at it, and I saw three things simultaneously. It was good for food. My stomach, which had never known hunger, never felt want, suddenly ached with desire that had nothing to do with nutrition. It was the desire for what I couldn't have, the ache of the forbidden. It was pleasing to the eye, more than pleasing, captivating, the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. How had I not noticed before? Every other fruit in the garden suddenly seemed dull by comparison. It was desirable for gaining wisdom. Wisdom, knowledge, understanding, being like God. And wasn't that the highest good? Wasn't that worth reaching for? My hand moved. I don't remember deciding to move it. Or maybe the decision happened so deep beneath consciousness, so fast that it felt like inevitability rather than choice. Like I was always going to do this. Like it was already written. My fingers closed around the fruit. Warm. Smooth. Perfect weight in my palm. And nothing happened. No lightning. No voice of thunder. No immediate consequence. Just me, holding fruit. The serpent watching with those patient eyes. I could have stopped. Right there. Right then. I could have let go. Stepped back. Run to find Adam. Called out to God. Asked directly why this fruit was forbidden instead of listening to a stranger's twisted logic. I could have chosen trust over curiosity. Obedience over autonomy. Faith over the need to understand. But I didn't. And here's what I need you to understand. What haunts me still. I didn't eat because I was stupid. I didn't eat because I was evil. I ate because in that moment, with everything, I knew, with all the love I'd been given, with paradise stretching out in every direction, it made sense. The serpent's logic was beautiful, seamless, reasonable. Why would a loving God keep good things from his children? Why would knowledge be forbidden? Why trust when you could know? And underneath all those reasonable questions was the real temptation, the one I didn't even recognize. Why obey when you could decide for yourself? I pulled the fruit from the branch. The sound it made, that soft snap of stems separating from wood, might have been the quietest sound in the history of the world. It should have been thunder. I stood there, holding it, studying its surface, feeling its weight, and 1,000 justifications flooded my mind. God was exaggerating about the danger. The serpent wouldn't lie. What would she gain? Knowledge can't be bad. Knowledge is power. Maybe this is a test. Maybe God wants us to think for ourselves. Maybe the real sin would be blind obedience. Maybe we're supposed to grow beyond the boundaries he set. All lies. Beautiful, reasonable, logical lies. But I believed them because I wanted to. Because I had already decided. And now I was just building a case to support a conclusion I'd reached before I ever touched the tree. I brought the fruit to my mouth. And then, everything changed. The taste exploded across my tongue. Sweet, rich, complex. Better than anything I'd ever eaten. Though maybe that was just the flavor of transgression, the forbidden made delicious by its very forbiddenness. I chewed, swallowed, and waited. Nothing. No immediate collapse, no lightning, no voice from heaven pronouncing judgment. Just me, standing there, juice on my lips, wondering what was supposed to happen. And then, slowly, like dawn breaking across a landscape I'd never seen before, my eyes opened. Not physically, they'd been open the whole time, but opened in a way I can't describe, like I'd been seeing the world in black and white, and suddenly color flooded in, like I'd been deaf and suddenly could hear. But it wasn't beautiful. It was horrible, because the first thing I saw with my newly opened eyes wasn't wisdom, or knowledge, or enlightenment. It was myself. My body. Naked. And for the first time in my existence, I felt wrong, exposed, vulnerable, inadequate, shame. That was the word for it, though I didn't have the word yet. Shame crashed over me like a wave, and I didn't know how to swim in it, didn't know how to stand under its weight. I needed to cover myself, hide, protect this sudden, overwhelming sense of wrongness radiating from my very skin. And that's when I saw Adam. He'd come looking for me, was walking toward me with that smile I knew better than my own heartbeat, that expression of uncomplicated love and trust and peace. And without thinking, or thinking too much, too fast, in ways that were entirely new and fractured, I held out the fruit. "Here," I said. I didn't explain, didn't warn him, didn't tell him about the serpent or the questions or the terrible opening that had just happened inside me. I just offered it. Why? God, why did I do that? Was it because I didn't want to be alone in this new terrible knowing? Was it because misery truly does love company? Or was it something even darker? Did I want to drag him down with me so he couldn't stand in that garden, perfect and innocent? As a living reminder of what I'd just destroyed, I'll never know. But I handed him the fruit, and he looked at it, then at me, and I watched his face change. He knew. He knew exactly what that fruit was, knew what I'd done, knew what it meant. And in his eyes, I saw a decision being made in real time. A choice between me and God. Between staying in paradise alone or falling with me into this new darkness I'd discovered. He took the fruit from my hand and ate. And I watched everything I'd just experienced happen to him. Watched his eyes change. Watched innocence drain from his face like color leaching from cloth. Watched shame root itself in him the way it had rooted in me. He looked down at his body, then at mine, and we both knew, in the same instant, that something fundamental had shattered. Not cracked, shattered. "We need to cover ourselves," he said, and his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater, distant, wrong. We ran to the fig trees, grabbed handfuls of leaves. Our hands, which had only known gentleness and precision, fumbled and tore and sewed crude coverings that scratched our skin and did nothing at all, to cover the deeper nakedness we now felt. And as we worked in panicked silence, I felt something else break. The unity between us. Before, there had been no space. We were one flesh, one mind, one heart beating in two chests. Perfect transparency, perfect trust, perfect love. Now there was distance. Small, barely there, but growing. He wasn't looking at me the way he had before, and I wasn't looking at him the same way either. Something had died between us in the same moment something had died in us. And then, footsteps. God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, just like always. Just like he had every day since the beginning, but nothing was like always anymore. That sound, which had always filled me with joy, with eager anticipation, with the knowledge that the one who loved me most was coming, now filled me with dread so profound, I thought my newly mortal heart might stop beating. "Hide," Adam whispered, his voice breaking. And we did. We ran into the trees, crouched behind bushes, made ourselves as small as possible. Two people who had walked openly in the light now cowering in shadows, trying desperately to become invisible to the one who sees everything. The footsteps came closer, and stopped, and God spoke. 3 words. Just 3 words that carried the weight of the entire universe. "Where are you?" He knew where we were. Of course he knew. He knows everything. He wasn't asking for information. He was inviting us to come out, to stop hiding, to face what we'd done, to be honest, to return. But we couldn't move. The silence stretched, elastic, painful, heavy enough to crush, until finally, Adam answered. "I heard you in the garden," his voice shaking, "and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." Afraid, naked, hidden. 3 words that had never existed in Eden before that moment. 3 words that described our new reality. And then the question that made time stop. Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? Direct. Clear. Unavoidable. And Adam, my Adam, who had looked at me with such wonder just hours before, said something I never imagined he could say. "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it. The woman, you, put here." Those words hit me like physical blows. He was blaming me. But worse, he was blaming God, for giving me to him, for creating the situation, for everything except his own choice to take the fruit from my hand and eat it. I wanted to scream. To remind him that no one forced him, that he chose, that we both chose. But before I could find words, God's voice turned to me. "What is this you have done?" And every defense I'd built, every justification I'd constructed, every excuse I'd rehearsed, crumbled. What had I done? I'd doubted the one who gave me everything. I'd believed a stranger over the voice of love. I'd reached for what was forbidden. I'd eaten death. I'd given it to Adam. I'd broken the only rule. I'd shattered paradise. I'd murdered innocence. But I couldn't say all that. Couldn't face the enormity of it. Couldn't bear the full weight of what I'd done. So I did what Adam had done. I blamed someone else. The serpent deceived me, I said. And I ate. True, but not the whole truth. Yes, the serpent deceived me. Yes, she twisted God's words. Yes, she planted doubts. But I chose to believe her. I chose to reach out. I chose to bite. The serpent opened the door, but I walked through it willingly. And then, judgment. God spoke to the serpent first, and curses fell like hammer storms, crawling on the belly, eating dust, eternal enmity with humanity. And then something else, something I didn't fully understand but felt was important, felt like a seed of light in all this darkness. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. A promise wrapped in a curse, hope hidden in judgment, a future I couldn't see but could somehow feel, pulling at me through the horror of the present, but I didn't have time to process it, because God turned to me and spoke words I've carried, like stones in my chest ever since. I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children, pain. The most sacred act, bringing life into the world, would now be marked by agony. Every birth a reminder, every scream an echo of this. Choice. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. And there it was, the perfect equality shattered, the partnership broken. From now on there would be struggle, tension, hierarchy where there had only been unity. Then God spoke to Adam, and the words were somehow even harsher. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. The earth itself, cursed. Work, which had been joy, now struggle. And death. Finally, clearly, inevitably defined. Dust to dust. Beginning to end. Life to death. The warning we hadn't understood was now crystal clear. When God finished speaking, the silence was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat for the first time, racing with fear I finally had a name for. And then, God came close. Despite everything. Despite our betrayal. Despite our blame-shifting. Despite our hiding. He came close, and he took animals from the garden. Watched them die. Watched life leave their eyes. Watched blood spill, the first blood ever spilled in creation. Death entering the world, because of us. For us, and from their skins, he made clothing. Real clothing, not our pathetic fig leaves, but actual covering, soft and warm and lasting. He dressed us himself. His hands, the same hands that had formed us from dust, that had breathed life into our lungs, now covering our shame with the death of the innocent. I didn't understand it then, I'm not sure I fully understand it now, but I felt it, judgment and mercy woven together. Justice and grace in the same moment. Consequence, and covering death and love. The man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil, God said. And there was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Grief. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat, and live forever. And I understood. We were being exiled, driven out, forever. Adam took my hand as we walked toward the edge of the garden. Not with the easy intimacy of before, but he took it, and that small gesture meant everything. I saw the cherubim take their positions at the eastern gate. Beings of terrible beauty wielding swords of flame that turned in every direction, guarding the way back, making sure we could never return, making sure paradise was lost forever. I looked back one last time. The garden still glowed, still breathed with impossible life, still held everything we'd known and loved, but it wasn't ours anymore. We'd traded it for knowledge, for autonomy, for the right to decide for ourselves, and the weight of that trade was crushing. Don't look back, Adam said quietly. But I couldn't help it. One last look at home. One last glimpse of what we'd destroyed. And then we turned and walked forward into a world that would resist us. Where every meal would cost sweat. Where every day would whisper what we'd lost. Where pain and death and struggle would be woven into the fabric of everything. A world we'd created with a single choice. That's my story. My truth. My confession. They call me the most hated woman in history. The first sinner. The one whose choice condemned every person who would ever live to pain and death and separation from God. And you know what? They're right. I did that. I chose it. Not because I was forced. Not because I was stupid. Not because I was fundamentally different from you. But because in that moment, disobedience sounded reasonable. And here's the part that should terrify you. If you'd been there in that garden, having that conversation with that serpent, looking at that fruit, you might have made the same choice. I know that's hard to hear. You want to believe you'd be stronger, wiser, better. But the temptation wasn't about strength or wisdom. It was about trust. Would you trust God's word even when someone else's logic sounded more reasonable? Would you obey even when you didn't understand why? Would you accept boundaries even when they felt limiting? And every single day you face versions of that same choice. Not with a literal fruit on a literal tree, but with 1,000 smaller decisions where you choose between trusting God or trusting yourself, between obedience and autonomy, between faith and the need to understand. That's why my story matters, not because I'm special, but because I'm you. The first version of you, making the first version of the choice you make every day. I can't go back, none of us can. We only move forward, carrying our choices, living with consequences, hoping that somehow redemption is hiding in the ruins that promise God made about the offspring who would crush the serpent's head. I didn't understand it in the garden, but I cling to it now, because it whispers that God isn't finished, that failure isn't final, that somehow, through someone, there will be victory over the evil that entered through my choice. It's a small hope, fragile, but it's all I have. And I hold it like you'd hold the last match in a storm, cupping it against the wind, believing it's enough to light something new. So now you know everything. You've heard my side, felt what I felt, walked with me through paradise and out the other side into exile. And I'll leave you with the question that haunts me still, the question I ask myself every single day. What would you have done? Not what you think you would have done, not what you hope you would have done. But if you were standing there, in that moment, with that serpent's voice in your ear and that fruit in your hand, what would you really have chosen? Think about it. Because the answer to that question doesn't just explain my story, it explains yours.